If you're wondering what it was like to infuse a cake with the flavors of pink lemonade, honey, applesauce, or even soda, then take a stroll down memory lane with these classic cake mixes that have sadly disappeared from store shelves. Sunkist surely evokes images of bright orange soda for most people, but the old-school Betty Crocker Sunkist orange cake mix from 1969 had something else in mind. Described as being essenced with a natural bright orange flavor, it got its taste from fresh, sun-kissed orange peels. It was originally advertised as one of the sunniest, brightest-tasting desserts you can imagine, with the infusion of zesty orange making it perfect for the summer season. There was also a matching frosting flavor that sported a signature orange hue as well.
Who loves orange soda?
At the moment, orange flavors aren't anywhere to be found in Betty Crocker's American Cake Mix lineup. However, if you're a fan of this popular fruit, the company has some recipes on their website that you might want to check out, like orange juice cake, creamy orange cake, and orange pound cake. A malt cake mix certainly sounds like a product of a bygone era. Malted drinks are still somewhat popular, but the same certainly can't be said about a cake version. As intriguing as it sounds though, this throwback Betty Crocker flavor is unlikely to ever return, so we'll just have to imagine what it tasted like. A 1956 ad for this mix states that the cake contained real malted milk, a tender crumb, and the perfect malt flavor. While this mix isn't available for purchase anymore, there is a malt cake recipe on Betty Crocker's website. Sadly though, the reviews aren't great, with one user bemoaning, "I was kind of disappointed. It was a good chocolate cake, but you couldn't really taste the malt." The recipe starts with a chocolate cake mix, and then you add malted milk powder to it. Maybe after some trial and error, you can manage to create the perfect chocolate malt cake all on your own. Forget pumpkin spice. How about honey spice? That's what was indeed on offer from Betty Crocker in cake form back in 1953. It could be used as the base of a fruitcake, thereby implying a festive, comforting flavor. Based on the ingredients listed on a vintage ad, it looks like the taste would have been pretty close to a muted gingerbread flavor. Though this particular cake mix isn't on the market anymore, there is a regular spice cake mix from Betty Crocker that is still available. It's a bestseller on Walmart's website, with reviews praising the overall taste and texture. One satisfied cake lover declared, "It's absolutely delicious with some homemade cream cheese frosting." While it's a shame that the honey spice is no longer around, it's great to see that the spicy offerings haven't disappeared completely.
Spicy.
Part of Duncan Hines' retro early American line of flavors, the applesauce raisin cake mix was on the market back in 1961. This enticing flavor combination was inspired by early colonial times when freshly baked cakes were made in kitchens produced from bountiful crops. A TV commercial for this mix featured a woman as a colonial-era house cook preparing a similar cake in her kitchen. Other cake mix entries in the early American line included fudge nut and butter pecan. Duncan Hines isn't really offering any flavors similar to the applesauce raisin cake mix anymore, though they do have an old-fashioned applesauce spice cake on their website that sounds like it would mimic the flavor fairly closely. There isn't anything around today quite like Duncan Hines' Butterscotch Crunch from 1962, which is a shame because it sounds intensely satisfying. As the company described it at the time, it's a cake you take from your oven all covered with a thick, crunchy crust of butterscotch and toasted almonds. There are plenty of butterscotch cake recipes that you can still make from scratch nowadays, but there aren't a ton of butterscotch cake mixes on the market, and we'd be hard-pressed to find any with a crunchy topping. That's too bad, as there are surely enough fans of butterscotch out there that would gobble something like this right up.
Keep a lid on her, Butterscotch.
Just one look at Pillsbury's pink lemonade angel cake should be enough to get anyone with a sweet tooth salivating. As a vintage print ad sums it up perfectly, it looks like fun, tastes like a party. Overall, the ad for this mix is a vision of pastel colors, and it's certainly a unique idea. What other cake mix tries to capture the essence of pink lemonade, after all? It's also worth noting that the box included 14.4 egg whites infused right into the mix. While this was originally a Pillsbury mix, Betty Crocker has attempted to recreate it with their own recipe. However, the reviews are split about whether or not it's worth your time. One person declared, "It looked and tasted great," but there's some disagreement among the reviewers about whether a white or yellow cake mix works best for the pink coloring. Maybe we'll just have to figure out a way to travel back in time to find out for sure. Pudding cake in a box might sound totally outrageous, but Betty Crocker wasn't afraid to introduce America to this unusual idea. Released in 2 decadent flavors, the lemon and chocolate pudding cakes featured undeniably interesting combinations that you couldn't find anywhere else on store shelves. In an ad for the mix from 1959, it was touted as a delightful treat featuring cake floating on top of decadent fudgy chocolate pudding, while also promising you get cake mix and pudding mix both in one package. While this chocolate pudding cake has since disappeared from stores, the idea itself doesn't sound half bad. You can easily find some recipes online that offer similar fudgy and rich results, and after trying them, you might find yourself wishing for the Betty Crocker mix to make a comeback. Sour cream and chocolate might not sound like the most obvious dessert combination if you've never tried it, but sometimes unexpected pairings make for the most delicious results. An ad for Duncan Hines' sour cream chocolate cake from 1977 doesn't offer much in its description about what makes this cake so special, but the appeal isn't too hard to understand. The ad does at least assert that the people of Hershey, Pennsylvania adored this particular mix.
Well, that is true.
In general, adding sour cream to cake is a great way to take your baking skills to the next level. This ingredient is very high in fat, making for cakes that are richer, moister, and more satisfying overall. When you think of it that way, this is clearly a match made in heaven. Alas, we can only now dream about how delicious this Duncan Hines mix must have been. Either that or have a go at making one from scratch. Whether they're in a cake, a cookie, or on top of ice cream, there's no denying how delicious and versatile chocolate chips are. Thus, a chocolate chip cake mix from Betty Crocker sounds like absolute perfection. It was a super moist offering that also featured pudding in the mix. It was around in the 90s, but alas, it hasn't made a resurgence since then. Stuffed with chocolate chips and frosted with vanilla chocolate chip icing, this mix undoubtedly sounds like a winner. It's a more recent entry than others on this list, so perhaps the aftertaste is still lingering in fans' mouths. Surprisingly enough, there aren't many chocolate chip cake mixes out there, which is all the more reason to revive this one. Chocolate chip remains a common flavor among muffin mixes, and you can certainly use a muffin mix to make a cake. But considering chocolate chips' enduring popularity, bringing back this Betty Crocker flavor feels like a no-brainer. The word burnt isn't one that you would usually want to hear in the same sentence as cake. But there's an exception to every rule, and this Duncan Hines burnt sugar cake mix from the 1950s is yet another fantastic mid-century flavor that makes us wish that time travel were possible. An ad from 1957 touts the rich caramel flavors of cooked sugar, which have a sweetly flavorful impact to give the mix its signature burnt sugar taste. The provided caramel came in a sauce packet within the box and could be used in the frosting as well as the cake itself. Innovative ideas like this one really need to start making a comeback. Sadly, there aren't many options for a regular caramel cake mix in the 21st century, let alone a burnt sugar one. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, as there are plenty of recipes you can try to make your own caramel cake at home. A macaroon cake mix might sound unusual, but Pillsbury made one back in the 1960s that sounds like it was absolutely worth a few nibbles. Described in an ad from 1966 as a rich fudgy cake with real coconut bits and chewy macaroons, it looks like Pillsbury pulled out all the stops with this rich flavor. In case you aren't familiar with macaroons, they're drop cookies that are made from egg whites, shredded coconut, and sugar. They're not to be confused with macarons, which are meringue-based sandwich cookies. Pillsbury's fudge macaroon cake was checkered with coconutty cookies and coconut bits, which certainly sounds delicious. This particular flavor may not be around anymore, but there are chocolate macaroon cake recipes available today that you could always use to bake your own cake instead. It's worth noting, though, that a lot of these recipes look like they'll require more ingredients than a basic chocolate cake. Still, that extra effort is probably the best way to capture this taste of the past, unless Pillsbury decides to resurrect this long-gone mix. Betty Crocker's Toffee Swirl cake mix looks like a work of culinary art. If it were still around today, it would probably be all over Instagram. The swirl component sounds potentially difficult to pull off, but we're sure that Betty Crocker had that handled with the baking instructions for this beauty. It looks like a standard marble cake at first, but judging by the name, there must have also been a boatload of toffee flavor that would make it more delightful than a typical modern marbled cake mix. An ad for this mix from 1962 doesn't offer much in terms of description description, but the big image of the cake itself suggests this would have been a very impressive bake. The taste might be a bit of a mystery, but the name and the delicious-looking marbling and frosting indicates that it was probably a big box of sweet, sticky, and flavorful joy.
Happy, happy, joy, joy.
Like pretty much every other entry on this list, Betty Crocker's Peanut Delight Cake Mix sounds like an amazing rendition of a dessert that surely many people would enjoy eating today. After all, peanuts are a reliable way to add some crunch and salty flavor to pretty much any dessert. According to an ad for this mix from 1956, it's made from real peanut butter, and it's touted as being melt-in-your-mouth tender. While the Peanut Delight isn't around anymore, there are still several cake mixes available today that come at least somewhat close to this vintage offering. For example, there's the Reese's Peanut Butter Coffee Cake Mix with streusel topping, which also comes from Betty Crocker. According to most reviews, it tastes truly great. As one home baker declared on Walmart's website, "This is fantastic, super easy to make, and ridiculously yummy." The Reese's mix isn't exclusively made up of peanut butter flavor the way that the Peanut Delight probably was, as it's a chocolate and peanut butter combination. Thus, while this modern option is still very tasty, it's not quite the same thing, which is all the more reason for these companies to start re-releasing their classic flavors as soon as possible.